And we are live. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. My name is Corey. I am with Vroman's Bookstore. And tonight I have the pleasure of hosting Jarrett Adams and Gil Garcetti discussing redeeming justice. Before we get going, there's a little green button down at the bottom of the screen. If you have yet to purchase your book, you can do so by hitting that green button. Jarrett has signed books, so you will be getting a signed book. If you have a question, there is also a tab at the bottom of your screen called Ask a Question. Please put your questions there so we make sure we get to all of them. And let's introduce our guests. Gil Garcetti was a prosecutor for 32 years. After leaving the DA, he pursued a career in photography. He wanted to bring the beauty of the world to the world through his lens. In addition to his photography, Gil became chairman of the California Science Center Foundation in 2019. His other hats include being an author, a TV producer, bringing water to West Africa, and truly a humble and inspiring human being. Jarrett M. Adams is an author and attorney specializing in criminal defense, civil rights, and wrongful conviction cases in state and federal courts. He used the injustice he had once endured as inspiration to become an advocate and then an attorney for the underserved and often unaccounted for. Thank you. I will be turning it over to you two.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Corey. Appreciate it. Jarrett, good to see you, my friend.
You as well. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank each of you for taking some time. And I think it's going to be productive time that you spend with us tonight, because this man that I met just a few months ago inspired me, and I'm sure he will inspire you. You're going to be here, and probably 85–90% of the time, you're going to be Jarrett speaking. But I wanted to tell you how I got involved in this. The Los Angeles Review of Books, an online review, came to me and asked if I would write a review. And I've written reviews before of books, but I said, nah, this is getting too close to home here. No, I think I'll pass. Why don't you get someone else? I mentioned someone else. I said, well, no, that doesn't work. And I said, well, all right, send me a copy of the book. They sent a copy of the book. I figured maybe it'll take 2 weeks to read it. In 2 days, I'd finished the book. And it was because of this man, Jarrett Adams, his prose, the beauty of his prose, and the message that he was sending about the injustice of our criminal justice system. This time, it was in Wisconsin, maybe even Chicago, but it's every place in the United States. And it's such an injustice that I'm the former top prosecutor in Los Angeles, the largest DA's office in the county. Did we engage in some injustice? I bet we did. I know some, but I bet I didn't know a lot of the injustice that took place. So that's why I decided, yes, I will do this. And I've engaged with Jarrett for some time now, and really hearing him out, saying, is this a genuine man? Who is he? He's a very genuine man, and indeed. But I want to start with this question, if I might, Jarrett. When you left prison and you finished law school, when and where did the idea of a book about your experiences come up? And take us through that history. So, I mean, you are not a well-known writer. Mm-hmm. They can't say, oh yeah, this is another book by Jarrett Adams. This is your book. Tell us about the history of how the book came upon.
Yeah. Well, Gil, listen, let me first thank you for just meeting with me, give me the opportunity to get to know me, because sometimes folks, who look like me, whatever's written on the paper is what is believed. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to meet you and for you to gauge who I was. I thought about this book for quite some time. I've always been an avid reader and reading and things like that growing up. And I often saw myself like, man, what would it be like to be an author? And I said, okay, well, I'll get to it after retirement. So my conviction is reversed. I'm working, I'm matriculating through the legal field, and I'm starting to do the work now, Gil. And I ran with this law degree, and I said, you know what? I got it. I got the key to all injustices stopping. It's this law degree. As I started to represent kids, and kids who look just like me, and their moms who reminded me of my mother, that's when the realization hit. What I was doing was like spooning water out of the ocean that is our criminal justice system and the issues that need to be fixed. So I said to myself, I want to write a book, because that is a document, that is something that I can use as a vessel to give to as many kids and inspire them to pick up this battalion to fight to equal justice, which is what we need. And we can't get to equal justice without equal representation in the law. So I would like to tell you, yeah, no problem, did the book in a jiffy. Gil, oh my God, I have tough cases in front of tough judges. Nothing could be as tough as having to walk back through those difficult moments and difficult chapters to where I am now. And doing so, it took 4 years to get the book idea and get everything solidified. And then finally, thankfully, end with Random House. But it took 2 years after landing with Random House to write the book, because I thought it was going to be easy. Gil, was I in for a rude awakening?
Man, but you did it. It's your perseverance. And this is one of the things I noticed about you as an individual, both in reading your book and when we talk. This man doesn't give up. Once he focuses on something that he thinks is right and then he needs to do, there's a mission behind this, you do it. But I think most people who are tuning into this today know the general idea of your book. That is, as a 17-year-old young man, you were convicted of a crime that never happened. You were convicted of a sexual crime, rape, and you were sentenced to 28 years in prison, even though you had never been arrested. You had never spent a day in a jail or in a prison. But before we go, or you go to some of the larger issues here, I want you to share a little bit about your family. Where you grew up, what that was like, and take us through as early as you can remember through about the time that you were arrested.
Yeah. My family was an integral part in my life, and they're a big part of the book. And, we grew up, me and my brother, south side of Chicago. My mom, she did the best that she could. My father and my mom ended up separating when I was about 5 years old. So my recollection about, who my father was, I don't recall. I didn't have a relationship with him growing up in the house. And so my mother and my aunts and my grandmother and my grandfather, back when the community of family would raise you, that's how I was raised. Someone was always at the house. Someone was always there, right? So there was no time that you could be, just wandering around and alone as a kid. Right. And Gil, when I was growing up, I thought, look, this is a bit obsessive. Like, why do you need to be able to scream my name and I need to be in shouting distance? Why do you have to keep looking out the window? But then it struck as I started to get through life, and I understood that for people who are raising African-American boys, it is a different type of upbringing that you have to have. And so this close-knit family, I'm talking about on every Friday, there was a fish fry or there was a get together. Birthdays meant something for everyone. It was a reason to get together, to commune together. And so you have that as a 17-year-old kid. And I'm so used to that. And then when I come home, now it's dialysis treatment. It's battling with dementia. All of the things that I thought just affected me, they infected my family so much. They impacted them so much. My grandfather had passed away as I was a kid. my grandmother as well. And it was just my mother and my aunts, but my grandmother and grandfather instilled in them in such a way that you have to rely on your sister, you have to rely on your brother. So it was still that community upbringing that was instilled into us by our grandparents, by my grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather. So when writing the book, I told myself, people have heard the stories of wrongful convictions. They're awful. They happen. People have heard the story about how much time can be lost. How do I effectively write this thing so that even people who the criminal justice system has never happened to or may never happen to because of circumstances, how do I write this thing in such a way to strike a unique chord that's amongst all of us? That's family, Gil. And I talk about the impact.
And it's very important. That's why I brought it up. But tell us a little bit about your mother. I mean, was she employed? What was she doing?
So my mother has always been employed, and she was she worked for HUD, Housing Urban Development for the government. And so she would when I was a child and she was working her ranks up through her job, she would have to drop me off at like 4:35 in the morning because her job was so far away from the city where we lived. And so she would drop me off over my grandparents' house, which is why I had such a close relationship with my grandparents and with my aunt. And I just got a chance to witness my mother do the best that she can as a single mother. And, till my stepfather came around and they were married. But I saw her, I saw my aunts. And what I didn't realize was this. I grew up in I had my own set of heroes, G.I. Joe, and you name it. I didn't realize that I was growing up in a family full of Black women who were superheroes because they saved my life.
Love it. Love that. But you grew up on the south side of Chicago. Now, most of us in the audience, certainly me, I've never been in the south side, but I sure have read a lot about the south side. Sure. That's a tough area. Tough town, right?
Yes.
All right. So all this time, did you have run-ins with the police while you were growing up?
So you're in a community. The police pull people over and stop people just because. But Gil, that was the reason what led me and my friends to say, we're not in these gangs. We're running from gang members and police interactions. Let's go. Let's get out of here, right? So we would go get in the car and go.
You're talking about your teenage years now.
Yeah, just to be safe.
Okay. So on the day that the incident that led to your arrest, etc., you'd already graduated from high school, right?
Yes.
You just graduated. You're planning to go into community college, and you're waiting for the summer, and you guys were looking for, to meet young girls or girls, your age, and doing it. So that took you to Wisconsin. There was, I'll just summarize this very quickly. There was a party going on. You struck up a good conversation with one of the guys there, a white guy, and you were playing computer games. And then a girl came down. Eventually there was consensual sex with you and your two buddies. Everything seemed to be okay. You went downstairs, you continued playing. There was a little difficulty between the young girl and her roommate. You eventually left, but you exchanged contact information with that one guy that you first befriended. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now I want to take you and I want you to read this part. I want you to read the part that really got me when you didn't know it, but the police were coming to arrest you. It's a short part, but please read it because I want our audience to hear your incredible prose. And I'm getting chills just thinking about you reading this, but please read it.
Yeah, this was definitely, this was definitely difficult, for me as well. So we have a warrant for your arrest, an officer says. I start to explain that they've made a mistake, that I'm innocent. The police swarm me. They handcuff me. I start to scream. but the words stay caught in my throat. The world starts to whirl. My legs buckle. I look up from the ground and I see the neighbors gawking at me. What did he do? They ask each other. And the cops. Nobody asks. Why are you taking him in? What is he accused of? They assume I'm guilty of something.
And later, not later, but we can see the force of racism coming into play here.
Yeah.
You were three young black guys.
Mm-hmm.
The woman that you had sex with was a young white woman.
Mm-hmm.
The county that you eventually are going to be tried, Jefferson County, Wisconsin, 96, I believe, percent white.
Mm-hmm.
Your jury was totally, there was not one black person of color on the jury. Is that
Not
correct?
even an alternate juror.
Yeah, I'm doing it. This goes on, and I want you to read another passage, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before you are sent to Wisconsin. You're, I think, in the lockup in the Cook County Jail.
Yeah.
It begins, we stand shoulder to chest. Please read that short paragraph.
So this scene is of me in a lockup in Cook County Jail. And if folks aren't familiar, Cook County Jail is the largest unified county in America, where, I mean, there's no way for as many people to be housed there that are being housed there. So this is me describing the bullpen and what it's like. I stand shoulder to chest, back to back, and butt to butt, claiming my space in this scrum. Waves of hot, vile breath blowing on my neck and face, mixed with the smells of urine, vomit, liquor, sweat, body odor, and recent defecation. I pinch my nose with my fingers, try to shut out the smell. I can't. I squirm and I start to feel the walls closing in, terror rising inside me. I play mind games to distract myself, add numbers in my head, make a mental list of the chores I still have to do, daydream, fantasize that I am far away from here on a desert island, in a school classroom, anywhere but here.
Powerful, powerful. Can you still smell and hear this? I mean, when you think about it?
I can still smell it. I can still hear it. And dishearteningly, as I visit the Cook County Jail to see my clients, it still happens today. You know, there's no, for whatever reason, we've allowed ourselves to have humanity and a human element taken right out of the Department of Corrections and how we treat people who are accused of crimes. And apologies don't fix years of life that is lost. And also, if we are to believe in the true breadth of what the Constitution states, that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, then someone explain to me why the county jails are in the conditions that they are in. Why coming in, the assumption is never innocence before proven guilty.
Yeah. You were never able to post bail, is that correct?
I unfortunately was not able to post a bond until there was the mistrial that was declared.
Right.
But initially, I sat. You know, my two co-defendants were able to afford a bond, and my mother just couldn't afford it. And I, you know, before I miss saying this, I when doing the book, when going through this, the one thing that I just kept being reminded of was just how hopeless, you know, my mother, single mother, you know, was in a situation like this, where she just couldn't even bear to see certain things, and all in her mind, she was talking to me. She knows I'm her son, but she said that the image of Emmett Till would block out my face when she would have discussions with me about this.
Wow. You know, when we talk about the injustices within the criminal justice system. There are various parts, but one of them is bail.
Yes.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you lived most of your life, if not all of your life, in the south side of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
You always lived with your mother, maybe a short time with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
You had never been arrested. Is that correct?
Yes.
You graduated from high school. And what was the bond that they asked that you post? How much?
It was a $20,000 cash bond. True.
Cash.
Yes. There was no 10%, no bail bondsman or anything like that.
So, this was Wisconsin. So there's no bail bondsman there. But you have to put up $20,000 cash.
Yes.
Wow. And two of your partners could do it, but you didn't have it, so you remained in jail all that time.
All that time leading up to the first trial. It affected everything, Gil. It affects how a person can prepare for their defense.
Of course.
It affects everything. And it also affects you being able to afford. Like, okay, so at the time I'm 17. I had a little, part-time job, but at least I would have been able to contribute to the, retaining the representation of something. The system is just so, it doesn't consider, Gil, poverty and people of color, because those are the people who were not at the table when the criminal justice system was created.
Yeah, I think it is in some jurisdictions now, but not enough. We're going there. And there are a lot of issues, obviously. You went to trial and you were convicted.
Mm-hmm.
There is a passage that I want you to read, a short passage that I want you to read about the night before your sentencing.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you what your expectation was and what actually happened.
Yeah. I'll read this. I don't sleep the night before my sentencing. I allow time to pass, counting the minutes in my head. Nothing seems real. None of it. In the morning, I move in slow motion. I pick up my food, push it around with my fork. I can't eat. I can barely walk into the courtroom. I feel numb. Then as the minutes tick by, I feel dead. I have not been shot or stabbed or hit by a car. But as I sit in the courtroom, waiting to hear a judge assign how much time I will be confined inside of a box with bars for a crime that never happened, I feel as if I were not me, that I no longer exist.
Now that judge had just, I think at the same hearing or earlier, I don't recall, had sentence also the one friend that had been convicted.
Mm-hmm.
He was sentenced to 20 years in state prison, correct?
Yes.
Did you also get 20 years in state prison?
I initially did. I initially was given the same sentence that my co-defendant was given. But there was a moment that I couldn't pass the opportunity of after the jury, convicted. I turned around to my family and I told them, I said, listen, I want to apologize, because that night I had told my mother I was spending the night over at my two friends' house, and they told their mother they were spending the night over my house. The classic alibi that everyone uses, right? So I just couldn't, and I still can't move certain memories out of my mind of the realization when my mother found out that I snuck to a party an hour and a half or so away. And so when I had the opportunity, I stood and I said, listen, I want to apologize. I apologize.
You're talking to your family.
I'm talking to my family. I said, listen, I want to apologize for putting myself in this situation, for putting you all through this situation. But you know who you raised. This isn't true. And while I will apologize for putting myself in this situation, coming up to this party, I'm never going to apologize for a rape that didn't happen. And the judge, told me at the sentencing hearing, she said she overheard my comments and that because I wasn't remorseful, she was giving me an additional 8 years. Now, Gil, I didn't even think that this was legal. But apparently, until the sentence is written down, you know, they can do what they want. I just was shocked that she went on record and said this. But yeah, I got 8 more years because in the court's mind, I was not remorseful, which is just a head scratcher.
So 28 years, and you were a person who at the time of the alleged crime was 17.
Yes.
Never been arrested before, graduated from high school, planning on going on to community college, living with your mother all these years, is working for HUD. All there, you're getting 28 years in prison. And here you are, obviously dumbfounded by all this. And we don't have time to go through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But your book graphically really displays the injustice and almost the criminality of so many people who were involved in this. Certainly your court-appointed lawyer, and we're not going to go into all this, but your court-appointed lawyer who was absolutely useless, in my opinion, based on what I read, the police who hid evidence, the prosecutor who hid evidence, the judge who said at the preliminary hearing type thing, there's no evidence here, there's no crime, but nevertheless, I'll send it on to the court for trial. Didn't have the guts to dismiss the case. And then ultimately, you know, your 28 years, the added 8 years, when you've always taken the position, how can I apologize? You didn't say this, but I'm saying this. How can you apologize if you didn't commit a crime?
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't do that and doing it. But nevertheless, you went in and you served some hard times, sometimes in solitary confinement, but you became active in the law library, and that helped you. Eventually, you were exonerated, fully exonerated.
Yes.
And doing it. But during our conversations, when we were together, you said something that really stuck with me. And that is that you had been urged time and again by your mother and your aunts and others to seek mental health assistance.
Yes.
And you said, oh, no. In my community, you don't do that. Men don't do that. But instead, eventually you were convinced to do it. Tell us about that experience and how it has helped you today.
Yeah. I wanted to be able to have a healthy conversation about what I knew was wrong in that system through the experience of living through it, and then going on to educate myself to be able to go back to articulate the fixes to it. But I couldn't do it if I wasn't stable and in the right mind. And I'll give an example. I am trying desperately to not let my family see just how damaged I am as a result of what I went through. I told myself they had been through enough. Those expensive prison phone calls, the visits, the $20 every other week, you know, through 10 years, that they had been through enough. I would try to fix this and handle this on my own. And I would go out in public. We would go to the grocery store, and my friends and my mother would just see that I wasn't okay. I wasn't okay around crowds. I remember dating a young lady, and she would, you know, be upset. And she's like, you're always looking at other, you know, women. And I'm like, I didn't know how to explain to her that I was looking at people's hands, because when you're in prison and people come out of those cells, you don't know what's in their hands. And so it was at that point that my mother and my aunts, they had a round table, and they just said, listen, we're angry. We're upset what happened to you, but you're on autopilot. And if you don't allow yourself time to heal, eventually you're going to crash. And so I started to after fighting it, I started to become receptive. And you know, therapy is funny because you'll sit in there and you're like, man, I can't believe I'm paying this person to be sitting up here talking, and all they have to say is, yeah. But the one thing that I will say, if therapy is working, you'll know it's working without even knowing it started. I had these conversations, and I struggled with compartmentalizing the things that had happened. But what I was able to do was channel the anger and frustration into the fuel that keeps me going. I thought I could catch up to these 10 years, and I thought I would, race and run and do this. But I was constantly being reminded, Gil, that I would never be able to get those 10 years back, that I needed to live the rest of my years with the remembrance of those 10 years, but with full eyes ahead on the future and the work that I wanted to do. Good
for you, man. Good for you. Well, one more question before we open it up to questions from our audience.
Yeah.
You probably included everything in the book that you wanted to, but was there one thing that didn't quite make it that you wish, God, I wish there had been a few more pages, or I thought about it earlier? Tell us about that if there is.
So the one thing that didn't get, that I could have spent a lot more time on, and I plan to do it on my next book, but the people sometimes they look at and see how far that I've come, and they assume that I've been compensated or given a lot of money through a lawsuit. I've never gotten anything. I've literally did this all on my own with the support of the community. And that's why I named so many people in the book, because I didn't want people to think, oh, look, he got out, he got a bag of money, he got out and this was easy for him. It simply wasn't. And I think that sometimes when you see wrongful convictions and you see them being reversed, you see so much of the fanfare, so much of the cameras clicking and everybody's celebrating. But people don't really realize when the last bulb has flashed and the last reporter has asked the last question, folks are going back to battle their own demons and deal with their own skeletons in their closet. And those things are mental. And if we do not find a way to bridge the gap between the mental health care system and the criminal justice system, we will never get to reform, because you can't have one without the other.
That's for sure. Yeah. Great. Let's, I've got more questions, but it's about 6:35. So we've been talking for close to, about a half hour. Let's open it up to questions. And we have a number of questions. So let me get my computer set up so I can get to those questions. Now 11 questions. Okay, good. Let me go to one of the questions. Okay. So the first question, I'll always give the first person the ability. Said, now that you shared this story with us, what's next for you, Jarrett?
Well, the next thing is duplication. This is what this is about. This is about duplication. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be able to represent everyone and be the voice for everyone. And in order for us to get to diversity and equality in our system, we have to diversify and make look equal representation of all the parts of our system. So right now we have a system that doesn't have as many African-American judges and prosecutors as it should, to be able to balance out the equality, to be able to have a fair and healthy conversation that is equally representative about everybody's background. You have to have diversity. And so what I am doing is we've built and we've started Life After Justice. It's a nonprofit that I have. And what we're doing is we're doing three things. Number one, the mental health care, bridging of that gap. Gil, I'm doing more than just talking about that. I'm sharing it in this book, Redeeming Justice, and I'm also trying to facilitate e-health opportunities for people who get out and don't have cars. All they have is their mom's couch, right? So if we can do this, we should be able to offer some mental health care that way. The second prong is that we should stop celebrating at the point of a wrongful conviction, and we should wait and hold the celebration for the passing of the legislation that puts in laws that start to create precedent that prevent the shortcomings that we know. Right now, you could put a camera on everything. So explain to me why there isn't a working camera on every interaction of authorities in criminal cases. This isn't to say, don't believe any cops or anything like that. This is to say, we just want transparency. We don't want you to tell us what happened when now technology has advanced to the point where we can see what happened for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How many people would have believed just how god awful it was what happened to George Floyd if you couldn't see it? Right? But we did. And that's why I'm asking that, we start to move towards precedent. The third is we are taking these cases of actual innocence that have the chance to create the precedent, and we're litigating them. We are operating as a smaller innocence project. I just feel like some of these cases, we can't stop at the victory of getting someone out, or what happens is we sometimes stop at the settlement of a lawsuit. Gil, that's not good enough. We have to start to treat this system the same way we treated COVID-19. This is a pandemic. This is an illness. This is a sickness that the numbers are showing continues to climb and rise. We're at 2.3 something people locked up in the United States of America. We cannot be the greatest country and the greatest incarcerator. Those two things can't be true at the same time.
Yeah, that number, the 2.3 million, is a staggering number. It's and there's no good explanation for it. Let me go on because there are several questions here. The next question to you is, do I understand correctly that you are interested in encouraging young Black men to pursue a career in law and criminal justice rather than dreaming of the unrealistic goal of becoming an NBA star? Hey, I have to tell you, I have to interrupt, because it was during our discussion that you made me smile when you said, look, I need to talk to young Black men because so many of them think they're going to be the next LeBron James.
Yeah.
What are the odds of them becoming LeBron James? They're much greater becoming a lawyer than becoming the next LeBron James. But so go ahead.
Yeah. I came up with that phrase from my experience in the criminal justice system. What I would do is this. We would go out for rec, and rec is when everyone goes outside. And at a certain point, I just became so serious about getting my freedom that I stopped playing basketball and would just read and stuff. But there was a couple people who, through the entire state, you would know what prison they went to, because these guys were so outstanding at basketball.
Yep.
It was just ridiculous. And so one of these guys I got to know because I started to help him do legal work. And so I helped him with his legal work. And I remember him calling different people nicknames on the court. And I didn't realize, Gil, until I got on a visit one day at the visiting room, that the two people he was calling nicknames, those were his father and his grandfather. So you had three people out of one family in a prison. And when I got to know the son, I got to know that he was like all of these awards for coming up as a kid, playing basketball and doing this and doing that. But then he had a baby, Gil, and real life hits you then, right? And so he made the decision to sell drugs. And as a result, his entire career and everything was derailed. And so I say that to say, we cannot be drafted or be number one best-selling artist and leave the South Side of Chicago and head north and live downtown. We have to come back to repair our communities. And so what better way to be able to do that than getting something where you don't have to be drafted to go do the work, right? You don't have to be signed. You don't need an agent. All you need to do is commit yourself to bettering the community. And you can also make money as well, being an attorney. And we desperately need more. And we more so need Black male attorneys than anything. That is the most underrepresented group in the legal system, is Black male attorneys, Black male prosecutors, Black male judges. So we don't attack that number unless we show kids that not only can you be an attorney, but it's also pretty cool and life-changing as well.
There you go. I have to share a little story with you in the audience. When I was district attorney, I would go out and talk at law schools about trying to encourage people to join the district attorney's office. So I was at UCLA law school graduate, but I went to USC.
Yeah.
I went to the law school there, and I talked to the first year class, and the whole class was there. And we were talking about what we do and how we do it. And we really need and want people who really understands what the true role of the prosecutor is. It's to seek justice.
Yeah.
It's not to get a conviction in every case. But then I noticed the ethnic breakdown. And they had probably in that class 11 Black women who were first year law students.
Yeah.
So I threw out, said, this is interesting. There are X number of you, say 11. I said, how many men? Where are the men? And this one Black woman jumped up at me and said, you know where you are. You put them in prison.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and when you look, there was more than an element of truth there.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying.
But Gil, did you do that, or did the systems design do that?
Well, the system is very questionable, obviously, at this point. We're all learning even more, even after I spent 32 years in DA's office. When I know today there are over 700 people on death row in California. Yeah. I know there are people on death row who do not deserve to be there. Some of them, maybe very few, but those very few, I don't care if it's one or two or three, were factually innocent.
Yes.
They were convicted.
Yeah.
So let's move on.
Yeah.
They said when the next question comes from a person says, and I'm not going to answer this one directly, and it's too hard to answer. How many people do you think are wrongfully convicted? Why does this happen? We've been talking about that in general. How many? We don't know, but there's too many.
Yeah.
Whatever that number is.
Yes.
I mean, every day almost, and that's an exaggeration, but certainly once or twice a month, we read someplace that a mistake was made and someone had been in prison for X number of years, 20, 30 years, and he was wrongfully, usually it's the man, wrongfully in prison because he did not commit the crime.
Yeah.
So there's no perfect system of justice, but certainly when it applies to Black and brown people, the system is quite harsh and perhaps even more unfair, or it is clearly more unfair.
Absolutely. And so from there have been a number of different groups who are trying to put a gauge on that number. And so if you look at the registry, the exoneration registry will give you an idea of what they believe through different data that they put together. And what they say is anywhere from 2 to 3% of the population is wrongfully convicted. And think about that. 2 to 3% isn't much unless you take into the account that we have 2-point-something million people locked up. So you're really looking at anywhere from 4,000 to possibly on the high end 8 to 10,000, right? That's a lot of people because you cannot just look at the people. What about the families, right? Because everyone has a mom and dad. So you count that 4 to 8,000 people and you times that by 2. And then you start to look at that and you start to look at, okay, well, what if people had kids? What do people do once they come home? So all of these things are something that should be factored in. And I also say this to the point that you made about how long it takes, Gil. I mean, you could be convicted in a matter of months, but you're literally waiting decades at a time, 5 to 10 years on the short end as an average, to even just get a day in court to be heard. There has to be a better way to do this. And I'll say this lastly. I was with I mentioned this before. I was out with my wife and we were somewhere and someone was like, their phone was falling. And you know how you do the catch it thing, right? So everyone was watching and looking and the phone hit the ground and everyone was like, they cringed because they knew that it was value in that thing that failed. and they could feel that pain.
Mm.
Until we start to see the value
Yep.
in the people who are going in and out of our prison system, and until we try to feel the pain of them hitting the ground, we can't get to where we need to in true reform.
Hear you, man. Thank you. I have another question. What were the consequences for the white woman who lied about the rape?
Well, this is typical, not just in my case, but in these cases that are overturned. You very rarely, if ever, see a prosecuting office go after the false accuser or the false claimer. It just simply doesn't happen. Now, there's a number of reasons why, because it could discourage some people who have legitimate claims of being assaulted from coming forward. So it's the discretion that's been used, and that's pretty much all I can say about that. But if someone asked me, would you have charged? Would you have won the press? No. And I say this with all seriousness, because when people get a chance to read the book, you'll see how everything came about. And you'll see just how juvenile and childish we were, but also the adults who did not act like adults and authorities in this case. And that was more so the problem than anything. I think that this was a snowball type of thing that happened. And, it was a situation where once the police come around and they start to tell you, well, you got to testify, you got to do this, the snowball happens. I really believe that that's what happened in this case. And because it's unfathomable that someone could look at this case and the accusation and the facts and move forward with this. I just still scratch my head today thinking about it.
Well, here's an interesting question. What can we do to better train public defenders on how to defend against rape and murder charges? Is a lot of the problem just their caseloads are so large?
Yeah, I would answer that with the last statement. It's not about, of course, training, we can always use training. But what it's really more so about is balancing the playing field, where you have public defenders' offices that are overwhelmed. They have caseloads out of this world, where, public defenders have caseloads that if a private attorney had that caseload, he'd probably be in front of the board of bar examiners explaining, why he's carrying so many cases when he can't be effective. And so what needs to happen is this. There's a pie chart that you guys can look at, and it's the Department of Justice. And it talks about the monies that are attributed to the different funds that it's allocated towards. And if you look at that pie chart, 70% of it is used on what they deem corrections. Corrections is 70% of it. Then you have mental health care like 2%, reentry like 7%, and a host of other different things going around. Until that playing field is leveled, then we really have no way at weeding out these wrongful convictions. I've been doing post-conviction work of people who have pled guilty, Gil, not because they were guilty, but because they were sick of sitting in a county jail. And it is one of the most horrifying things ever that I come across.
Yep, believe it. Let me throw out a question to you from me, if I might.
Yeah.
You are a very articulate spokesman for what you're talking about, the injustice within the criminal justice system and the reform that is necessary. If some of the viewers watching this today want to engage you in some way, invite you to come and speak at a church, temple, synagogue, mosque, or a large group, a club type group, are you interested in doing that kind of thing, or does that just not make sense for you?
I am very interested in doing that, because Gil, the only way that we get to reform and we get in the middle is by people, able to get me in front of, let's have a conversation. You can read a story or read an article about me all you want, But it's not until you have a chance to speak with me and sit down, and then you're like, well, damn, I can have a beer and watch a game with this guy, right? And until we're able to, and I thank you for that. And until we are able to get people to start seeing other people in that light, it's hard for people to care. And so when I've been doing these presentations more and more, and when I go and do it, I use slideshows to show you the numbers. You need to see the numbers in your own communities and what's going on. And these numbers, let me tell you how important it is. In the criminal justice system, a high average, 90% of the clips, they will be out, meaning that they aren't on death row, they aren't in prison for life. They'll reintegrate back into the community, both men and women formerly incarcerated. So the communities in which they reintegrate back in are predominantly the communities in which they were arrested in. So should I continue to go on with why it's important for the public, for the community to pick up this armor of reform? Because the problem and also the danger is that people are being warehoused in the Department of Corrections for years, decades at a time. And they're not being trained on how to reintegrate back into society. And they're being released right back into these communities. And now the communities are boiling over into our downtowns and into other areas. So we can't stand around and think that this is going to fix itself. We have to demand transparency and equality and fix it, because this is feeding back into our communities, Gil.
Appreciate it. Just a few more questions we have time for, but let me, if you can, give a somewhat short response to this question. Hi, Jarrett, can you tell us about lifeafterjustice.org?
Yes. So please go and visit lifeafterjustice.org. Lifeafterjustice.org is an organization that is exoneree founded and led. I found this with a group of other men and women who were exonerated of crimes that they didn't commit. And looking at an issue as big as the criminal justice system, we just wanted to tackle three main components. And those were the components that I spoke of before. That is the mental health care aspect. That is the advocacy for legislation that will be precedent to prevent these things from happening. And then there's also the litigation of the cases. Here's the uniqueness in what we're doing. We need the community to help. And we need the community to reach out, to support, and to help. In each county, in each jurisdiction that you're in, you send us an email, you want to help. We more than likely have people who are in those areas who are affected by these issues that we champion. And so we need the community to support. We need lawyers. We need law firms. I said this before at the dinner table with you, Gil. This isn't going to work without all hands on deck.
Yep. And
we need lawyers and big law firms to take a pass on corner bakery lunches. And why don't you put that money into a fellowship to someone in their community to help go back and fix the issues in their community? We need everyone.
Super. Two final questions, but also the comment from me. Mm-hmm. You will learn so much more about these issues when you read the book. So buy it, share it with others. It's a powerful, powerful book. So two questions, if I might.
Yes.
First question, and then I have one about your wife. So but I'm going to hold that.
All right.
I said, Mr. Adams, you said so much tonight. Can you emphasize one thing you want people to take away from your book? If you had one thing, what is it? What you'd like us to do that you haven't already covered?
Well, I want to say this, and I hope everyone can get this. The people who are closest to the problems, they usually have a solution. They are just the furthest away from the resources to implement those solutions. And so I want everyone to walk away and think, how do we start to put people in leadership, decision-making positions to make the criminal justice system better, to make reform better? And so the question is a great question, because it sounds like it comes from someone who's like, look, I'm in this field that isn't necessarily a part of the criminal justice field. But how do I help? Well, you help by identifying diverse individuals and supporting them as well. You can, support Life After Justice. You can start a scholarship where you can find your own law student and say, listen, when you get out of law school, I'm going to collect or amass $40,000 from a group of people to have a year fellowship for you to do this type of work since you're from this community, and it can help. So there are a number of different things, but the one thing that I will say is this: we have to fight, push, and pull people who are closely affected into the leadership decision-making positions. Because if not, we'll continue to have plumbers telling dentists what to do. And that never works.
One final question about your wife.
Yes.
Go ahead. Tell us about how you connected with her. She's a lawyer, and she's, I think, enticing you to move to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Since she's working here. But tell her share with us how she inspires you on a daily basis. And I don't know the answer to this, so it's, she didn't put me up to this question either.
Yeah, it probably was one of her friends on here. No, I'm just look, I have no problem at all bragging about just how amazing my wife is. So my wife Joy is from the city of Detroit, born and raised, and she was actually born legally blind. Had corrective surgery, and went through law school and never made an excuse, right? Someone born, not being able to read and I just take for granted being able to see things and stuff, and to go through and not let that stop her goals and dreams. Take a chance on having a surgery that could have left her completely blind, and through the grace of God, it worked, and it allowed her to go on and go through law school, never complain. And when I look at that and I see, that type of energy, it is just so inspiring, to me. When I learned through courting her that she had grown up in a house where she was visiting her brother in a prison system, and how that affected her, growing up. I ran into some, oh my God, I can't even tell you some girls I ran into before I met my wife. And I'm just so thankful to have met her. And more importantly, she was a lawyer practicing law for 7 years. And I halfway didn't think, I had a shot. But I think that in a lot of ways, God directed that energy and synergy to connected us to each other, because we just fit in a number of different ways. We actually just ending this in this magical moment that is this life and this story. So the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals reversed my conviction unanimously, and I was released from prison in 2007. I clerked and did what was called a dual fellowship, which started in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. I met my wife through the Seventh Circuit judge, Aaron Claire Williams, and we were married in the chambers of the Seventh Circuit. Now, Gil, I don't have any luck at anyone's casino or anyone's scratch out card, but that is just like lottery type of stuff.
You hit the jackpot, man. You hit the jackpot. Cool. One last comment question. If people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Look up JarrettAdamsLaw.com. It's the best way to get in touch with me. Great. And I am so serious when I say this. We can use the community support. People who are retired looking for things to do. What we're doing is this. We're doing a lot of research. We're doing a lot of writing. We're doing a lot of being present and arguing and advocating for the change of this system. Someone, a prosecutor, a former AUSA named Mike Monaco, took me under his wing when I first came home and was trying to get into law school and stuff like that. One thing he kept telling me was, man, just get up and just try to do the right thing every day, right? And I think that as people, we should be trying to get up every day and preserve this earth in the shape that we want to leave it to our descendants. And if we're doing that, there's no way we can let this criminal justice system continue on like this.
It's been an honor. Thank you for inviting me to join you with this. Thanks of Vroman's, just a marvelous, marvelous bookstore in Pasadena for sponsoring and make this possible. Corey, it's yours.
Oh, no. Thank you guys so much, Jarrett and Gil. This was a wonderful, wonderful event. And all the things talked about, I don't know. I was emotional. I don't know about anyone else in the audience, but I
Come on,
really...
Corey, don't cry. I can't cry in public. I'll lose my street cred.
Oh, some of the things you said, though, Jarrett, were so moving. And anyhow, I really appreciate you both being here. And for the audience, I really appreciate you guys showing up, too. And one more time, that little green button at the bottom of your screen, press it, purchase your book, and in the comments area, make sure you say signed book, because Jarrett went in today and signed his books for you all. And
Corey, one other thing, if I may interrupt, you might let people know that this has been recorded, and they may share this with others so that they can also experience Jarrett Adams.
Yes, after the event is closed, there will be a replay, and you can access that immediately when the event is done. Go back to Crowdcast or through Crowdcast through Vroman's Live. Go to the past events, and then you can see the replay there at any time. Tonight,
Right.
Tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, if
Super.
Crowdcast is still here. And I did not mean to rhyme, you guys. Thanks, you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Super.
Have a great night.
Good night.